Welcome back to another episode of Bree Talks MMA. So the first thing I want to get into is the Nemesis Fighting Alliance event we had on Friday right here in St. Louis at the Armory, which was an incredible venue. This was probably one of my favorite local shows I've been to for multiple different reasons. First of all, Nemesis does an excellent job with the production, with promoting the fights, with giving the fighters a platform. They found an amazing venue. I mean, they used to have them at Ballpark Village, which I thought was super cool. And then now they're having them at the Armory, which is amazing. I mean, this venue was just unreal. Jeremiah Scott versus Dakota Bush was the main event. And I'm going to get into that fight in a second. The whole card from top to bottom was so much fun. There were actually a lot of really good amateur fights on this card. I'm trying to keep them all straight. I cannot remember all of the fights because my phone died during like the last half of the amateur fights. So I got like the first 4 or 5 fights recorded on my phone, and then the rest of them, my phone died. So sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. But I tried, okay? I tried. But the first fight of the night was absolutely insane. Bryce Kaiser got a first round knockout TKO, whatever you want to call it. What a way to kick it off. He really did just kind of go in there with the intention of, as Ray Hayes would say, separating his opponent from their consciousness. Still my favorite line. Still my favorite Ray Hayes line. Man, that guy doesn't talk a lot, but when he does talk, he says some really interesting stuff. And then we had Jackson Ward made his MMA debut, got a first round submission. That was just beautiful. Man, I did not expect that. Not gonna lie. Jackson is a super nice guy and very chill. Like, just seems like such a normal dude. Like, you did not expect him to go in there and destroy his opponent like that. I mean, it was just absolute destruction. So, wow, what a debut for Jackson Ward. That was super impressive. I was very, very impressed with that. And his ability to just stay calm. I mean, even backstage, felt like he was just kind of pretty chill, honestly. I mean, I don't know what's going on in his head. He could be freaking out for all I know. But on the outside looking in, looked like he stayed pretty calm. So, yeah, that was insane. And then Zach Binkins gets another first round finish. And that was a really, really fun fight too. And then after that was an incredible fight. Caden Osick versus Xavier Thomas. It was really fun to watch. One of my favorite fights on the card. It did get fight of the night. I thought my 2 favorite fights of the night were Logan Jones versus Calvin Gilmore and Caden Osick versus Xavier Thomas. Those were my 2 favorite fights. Derek Davis versus Atticus Brunner. So Atticus had an extremely entertaining fight. It didn't last very long because he ended up getting the knockout, but that was a really fun fight, and he did kind of face some adversity, which, you know, I think is a good thing. In your amateur career, I think that I've seen enough amateur fights to kind of tell, you know, that if a fighter almost has too perfect of an amateur career, sometimes that kind of just raises a lot of question marks when they go pro. So I do think it's a good thing as an amateur to have that adversity early on, but then be able to overcome that adversity is even better, obviously, which is what Atticus did. That kick that he threw was gnarly, and it was, I think he kind of set it up with, I can't even remember the whole thing. I'll have to watch the fight again once they're up on YouTube, but I think he set it up with maybe a couple punches. I can't remember exactly what he threw, but yeah, nonetheless, it was a very impressive performance. That was probably the one that stood out to me the most, probably, on the amateur fights, was that one, or at least on the early part of the card, before the intermission. That was probably the one that I remembered the most clearly. But man, a lot of great fights on this card. It was insane. Logan Jones versus Calvin Gilmore, like I said, that was an insane fight. I Obviously, would have loved to see Logan win the fight. I mean, I train at ESMMA, which is where Logan trains, so you always want to see your teammates and your friends win. But I think that, this is a performance that obviously didn't get the result that he wanted, which you always want to win. But I thought that Logan showed that, first of all, he's got a lot of heart. To be able to get, I think it was maybe in the third round, I think is when he got kind of rocked. To be able to fight your way through that is huge. And I think that is a testament to, how hard he's been training. It's a testament to just his will and his heart. I think that he showed that he has what it takes to be a fighter. I really do. And maybe sometimes you have to lose a fight to figure that out. I think Logan does have what it takes. I really do. And I think that this fight actually will probably do more good for him than if he would have won the same way that he won the last fight, because his last performance was extremely impressive. Extremely impressive. He got 9 takedowns. I mean, it was insane. So obviously you see that performance and, you are impressed nonetheless. But I'm still just as impressed with this performance, even though he lost, as I was with the last one. And it's because he showed more areas of his game too. He showed more of his striking. He showed that he has a chin. He showed that he can handle the pressure. He showed a lot of things. And I think that this will help him, maybe not so much right now, but when he goes pro, which I do believe he will, when he goes pro, this will be a fight that will prepare him for his pro career, I believe, for many different reasons. But yeah, and his opponent, man, he put up a really good fight. So whereas I thought, Logan was going to go in there and do what Logan does, I mean, man, his opponent was game. So, yeah, and that's what made it such a great fight, too, which they both were 100% in there. They gave it everything they had. And, maybe it's just a few adjustments that Logan needs to make. I'm not his coach, so I'm not going to sit here and tell him what he needs to do because I really don't know. That's for Eric to figure out, not me. But I do still see a ton of potential in Logan, and I do still think that regardless of the result, I do think that he will make it very far in his career in MMA. So props to Logan for putting up a great fight, and props to Calvin for getting the win and for doing it in an impressive way against a very tough opponent in Logan. So, yeah, that was a great fight. And then I kind of got lost after that. There were a few more fights. I know Troy Harvey Valiant. Yes, that was the kickboxing fight, and that was a unanimous decision win for Troy. Gosh, my brain is fried. And I've seen Troy fight before. I saw his last fight in Stand-Up Fight Series. He looked fantastic. And he's actually really got some impressive wins if you look at his amateur kickboxing career. I think he's not getting finishes, but he's putting on impressive technical performances. So I think there's something to be said for that. And I'm excited to see him again. I mean, he's definitely one that's been on my radar of fighters to watch, and there's so many local fighters, so it's hard for me to keep track of all of them sometimes, especially since I cover the UFC and PFL and all these other different organizations. But he's definitely been on my radar. And then the next fight after that, Malachi Mitchell, that fight was that was an MMA fight, I believe. I want to make sure because I don't want to sound stupid. Oh, okay, now I remember. Yes, that was actually a good fight too. Malachi Mitchell versus Luke Winston. Luke Winston ended up getting the win there, but yeah, I thought it was a great fight. And then Tavon Taylor got a knee bar submission. So that was absolutely insane. And I'm kind of looking up some of this stuff right now because I didn't have time to yesterday. But Tavon Taylor is an amateur, but a very experienced amateur. So he has quite a few amateur MMA fights, and he also has some amateur kickboxing fights as well. He looked great on the feet too, I thought. I mean, it wasn't very long of a fight, so it's kind of hard to judge. And this being my first time seeing him fight, I don't really know much about him. But I'm looking here, and it looks like he is, at least it says he's 7-3 in MMA, in amateur MMA. So yeah, he's probably about to go pro, I would think. I'm excited. It looks like he's had a lot of first round finishes too. And he's not fighting easy opponents. He's never fought anybody with a losing record. His opponent, Corey Donovan, he was 3-1 going into this fight. His last fight, he lost to Chris Connors. Chris Connors, I've actually trained with before. He's exceptional. Very talented fighter. See, I can just go down these rabbit holes on these MMA pages. It's so easy. But yeah, Tavon is one I'm definitely, if he wasn't on my radar before, he is now. And then Clark Stith, he's been on my radar for a minute. I honestly expected him to win just because of the way he won his last fight. I thought he looked very dominant on the ground. And then this time he got a first round submission. These guys coming out of Wolves Den are monsters. They really are. And I think that what they're doing there is really cool too with the cross training that they're doing. They're allowing fighters from other gyms to come train there and vice versa, which I think will be a really cool thing for St. Louis Combat Sports. I am going to do a breakdown of the 2 pro fights. So we got Ray Hayes and we've got Dakota Bush. Ray Hayes is now 3-0 in pro MMA. He had a very good amateur career as well. He was 9-1 as an amateur. Never been finished. Yeah, he's a problem. He is a problem. And not only that, but he's a showman too. Like, you wouldn't expect it. Like, I had him on my podcast and I talked to him for about an hour. And not the most talkative guy in the world, but I honestly don't think he needs to be. He has literally everything you could ask for in a fighter. Fun to watch. He puts on entertaining performances. He's young. He's only 22. He's got a ton of skill. When he's in the octagon, it just seems like more than a fight. It's really a performance for him. And he's a crowd pleaser. I mean, man, the crowd was going nuts after that fight. And the way he got on top of the cage and he's like brushing his shoulder, I'm like, man, this guy's got so much swag. It's really fun to see a fighter early in their career already just doing everything right. He said he trains at Parabellum, and he's got another pro fighter, Colton Carmack, I think is his name. Colton Carmack. So he's another pro fighter, and he's kind of taking Ray under his wing a little bit, I guess, in kind of helping him with deciding on his matchups and kind of doing a little bit of that work for him so that Ray doesn't have to worry about finding fights and all that stuff. You know, Colton kind of helps him with that and helps him with the strategy and the game plan and all that side of it. So it's really honestly brilliant what he's done with aligning with the right people and getting on a track for his career to, I mean, man, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him in the UFC in the next couple of years. I really wouldn't. With the strength of schedule that he had as an amateur, that's why I say that, because he fought 10 times in 1 year. Or over the course of a year, I guess you could say. Maybe a little bit over a year. If he's even able to do 5 fights in a year, that could get him to the UFC within the next 2 years. Like, that's the thing. So, because he's already got 3 fights as a pro, 5 more fights, he's 8-0 if he wins all of them. So, I mean, yeah, that's not unheard of now. That's the thing. I mean, he could go in Contender Series at 7-0, 8-0, and end up getting signed. Absolutely, he could. I am very excited to see what's next for him, because I do think in order to do that, he is going to need some higher level opponents. The thing is, it's going to be really hard for him to find an opponent, especially after that. I mean, he's just going out and finishing these people so easily. So it's going to be hard for him to find an opponent. He's got very good boxing, and he told me that he started boxing before he started MMA. So he has kind of a background in boxing, which was like basically the discipline that he started with. And then also, Not only that, but he has good ground game. He's got a ton of submissions under his belt already. So he's got good boxing combined with good ground game. That's a dangerous fighter. And he's got reach. Yeah, I think he's going to have a lot of success. I think he is absolutely, if you were to take all the ingredients of a fighter that's going to be successful, it would be Ray Hayes. He's got all the ingredients. He's got the sauce. He's got the talent. He's got the skill. He's got it all. So, yeah, I mean, I'm very excited. I am curious to what he's going to look like against, maybe somebody that's got more of a resume. I'm curious to see how that's going to go, but I am not going to doubt this guy until I have a reason to. So it's just really hard to bet against somebody like that. Really hard. Got a lot of confidence too, which I think is huge. And it's not a fake confidence. You can kind of tell when somebody has a fake confidence. But I talked to this dude for an hour. His confidence is legit. He knows what he's got going on. So, yeah, I don't see him losing anytime soon, but I could be wrong. I mean, I've been wrong before, but he just has that thing, that when you see somebody and you're like, oh, that guy's going to be in the UFC one day. He's got that thing. He's got it. I don't know what to call it or what it is, but he's got it. So, I don't know. Anyways, getting back to his performance, it was an interesting fight because it started off with his opponent was honestly... He threw some really nice combinations at Ray to start off the fight. And I think Ray's boxing experience was kind of what allowed him to stay calm in that situation and not really allow that to affect him. I mean, he really looked unfazed. And he got hit with some bombs. I'm not even lying. There was, I can't remember what combo it was, but a couple straight punches that his opponent threw, and honestly, it looked like it probably hurt quite a bit. I mean, Ray didn't look affected by it, but it looked like it hurt. Threw a couple kicks too that were really nice. So then Ray immediately took it to the ground, and I don't know that Ray took it to the ground because he was afraid to stand with his opponent. I don't think he was afraid to stand with him by any means. It didn't look like it to me. I just think that Ray saw an opportunity to take him down and took it, which is smart. That's what you should do, and slammed him against the octagon right in front of his corner. Beautiful. Love it. Just how fast he took him down was insane. So I was really impressed with the takedown that started off the sequence, and then also he had to kind of change positions a couple times because, like, at first, his opponent tried to get him in a guillotine. He kind of had to transition off to the side a little bit, but not like side control. Like, he had one of his knees on his opponent's stomach, and then that was when he was kind of going for the arm triangle choke, and eventually he got it, but he had to kind of adjust a few times to get it. And his opponent was moving around a lot too. So sometimes, you see a fighter try really, really hard for a choke and then they don't get it. And I was afraid that was what was going to happen. But he stayed committed to it and he got it and he finished the fight. So it was really impressive. And and it was just fun watching the whole thing. I mean, from start to finish, from his walkout, which was awesome too. I mean, he had, and I don't know if a lot of people know who Zeus is, but he had Zeus Waters walk him out, who's pretty well known in like the St. Louis hip hop scene. And I remember him back from when I worked at Jupiter Studios because he was there occasionally, and he's been around for a long time. So that's pretty cool to have him walk you out. The whole thing was fun, and I very much enjoyed it. So congratulations to Ray Hayes on another first-round finish. He's 3-0 now, 3 first-round finishes. So we'll see who's willing to step up to the plate and fight him next. I really think it's going to be difficult for him to find somebody, but we'll see. Hopefully he can. The main event, Dakota Bush versus Jeremiah Scott. So Jeremiah Scott, I believe, was 10-7 going into this fight, and he has a lot of experience. He also has experience in bare knuckle fighting championship and bare knuckle boxing. So this was a high level fight. And to me, the type of fighter that Jeremiah is kind of really what you get a lot in bare knuckle boxing. And bare knuckle boxing is a completely different game than boxing, than MMA, than kickboxing. It's just a different sport. And you could argue in a lot of ways that it's easier because there is less training involved in bare knuckle boxing than there is in MMA. I think MMA has probably out of all of the combat sports, probably has one of the more demanding training regimens than all of them. It's very hard on the body. So bare knuckle boxing, you don't have to train the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu. You don't have to worry about kicks. You don't have to worry about getting calf kicked and stuff like that. So in some senses, it's easier in that way. There's less ways to lose. There's also less ways to win, though. But on the other side of that, on the flip side, bare knuckle boxing is very difficult because not having the gloves turns it into a completely different game. And I don't think people understand like in bare knuckle boxing, most of the time, even if you win, you're probably gonna walk away with some scars and you're gonna walk away with some damage to your face, even if you win, because it doesn't take much. It does not take much for you to get cut. It doesn't take much for, your face to kind of blow up and get really swollen. So there's also that. Also, broken hands are more common in bare knuckle boxing because you cannot hit as hard as you can with a glove on. I do think that one aspect of bare knuckle boxing, when you compare it to traditional boxing, that also makes it more difficult, and why I think a lot of MMA fighters are very good at bare knuckle boxing, is because of the clinch. So in bare knuckle boxing, you can clinch as long as you have, I believe, as long as you have one hand free to punch and you're actively throwing it. I believe that is the rule. So you can't really do that in regular boxing, obviously. And then also just not having the gloves makes a huge difference. Like, that's why we see sometimes Muay Thai in MMA gloves is more fun to watch, because clinching with gloves on is a lot more, well, it's not necessarily that it's more difficult, but it's just different with gloves on and not with gloves on. So Jeremiah Scott, obviously a very tough opponent, and he's got a lot of different experience. Not only MMA, he's got bare knuckle boxing. So definitely presented a lot of challenges for Dakota. And Dakota, he's been in the UFC, so obviously he's good. You cannot go to the UFC if you're not good. Let's just clarify that. If you've made it to the UFC, you are good. You are very good. Better than most if you've made it to the UFC as an MMA fighter. Especially in Dakota's division. And he only fought for the UFC twice. So he had 2 fights in the UFC. I am a little surprised that he got cut as fast as he did. But at the same time, he's in the lightweight division. And things change so much with MMA that it's like, if he was in the UFC right now and had a 2-fight losing streak, I don't think he would get cut. But at the time that he got cut, that's just how things were going. So I just don't see the point of him competing on this level anymore, especially after seeing that. And he even gave his performance a D- when he was on the mic afterwards. I think he'll probably change his thoughts on that when he rewatches the fight, if he hasn't rewatched the fight already. What I think is important to note about this performance is how much skill Dakota showed in this fight for multiple reasons. So, and this is why I think he has a strong case for getting back into the UFC, just because it was so dominant of a performance. This was an extremely dominant performance. There were very few moments in this fight where we thought Dakota had even a chance of losing. It was insane how much control he had in this fight. And I think that's the biggest thing. And I think that has a lot to do with him training with Grant Dawson, is Grant Dawson's ability to take you down and keep you there is insane. I think that is probably what he is best at, is his control on the ground, which is easier than it sounds, or harder than it sounds. Sorry. because when you look at Dakota's opponent, if you watch the fight over again, you'll kind of see what I'm saying. Very active on the bottom. Very active on the bottom, constantly trying to set up submissions, throwing elbows from the bottom, and Dakota shut it all down. He shut it all down. He did get cut with an elbow at one point, or maybe a couple elbows from the bottom, which just shows you how talented Jeremiah is from his back. Dakota's performance showed that he has the ability not only to take you down, but to keep you there. And that is a skill that not a lot of fighters have. And that's why I do think he belongs in the UFC, and I think he will do extremely well when he goes back to the UFC. I think he's improved a lot, even just from training at ATT. And it just shows you, having those training partners. Because if you're in the lightweight division, that gym gives you probably the best possible training partners you could ask for. He's got Grant Dawson. He's got Gamrot, who's about to fight this weekend. And he's got Dustin Poirier. He's got all these guys that are so high level in the UFC. I mean, look at the top 15 in the UFC, and look how many of them train at ATT. It's insane. So I think that, and honestly, Dakota kind of looked like Grant Dawson a little bit in this fight. But the one thing that he is really good at is still doing damage while he's on top with these elbows, which you couldn't really see. Like when I watched it the first time, it was kind of far away, so I couldn't see what was going on the ground exactly. But when I watched it again in the replay, he was throwing a lot of short elbows from the bottom, or from the top, that were doing a ton of damage. Not only that, but also there are a couple of things I want to highlight in his performance. When Dakota gets him on the ground, he does an excellent job of controlling the space between them to make sure that Jeremiah doesn't have space to throw up a triangle, maybe land some damage of his own from the bottom, or give him an opportunity to get up. So Dakota did a great job controlling that space and in keeping his opponent where he wants him. That's what really stood out to me. He also did a great job with his head position, and I think that's really important too, with maintaining that space, or not giving your opponent too much space, and also keeping them on the ground. And even in the second round, I can't remember if it was the second round or the third round, his wrist control too, where he was basically grabbing Jeremiah's wrist and controlling that arm, which honestly is really smart, because that not only helps you control your opponent, but also can prevent them from trying for different submissions off his back, which Jeremiah, to his credit, was really slick on the from the bottom. I thought there were a couple times where he had an opportunity to possibly get a submission, but of course, with Dakota being so talented in the grappling department, he pretty much shut all of that down. So I probably could watch this fight 10 times and never get sick of it, just because each time I watch it, it's like there's a new thing that I notice in Dakota's performance. And it was just incredible to watch that high level of MMA on a local level, like being able to watch this in my backyard pretty much. We didn't get to see as much stand-up from him, but he did throw some really nice kicks. I would have probably liked to see a little bit more of his striking, but he's so talented on the ground. First of all, he's got a ton of experience in the sport. He's been training and fighting for over a decade in MMA, but also he's just leveled up so much with training with Grant and training with Gamrot, two of the best grapplers in the lightweight division right now. Like I said, I would have liked to see more of a stand-up, but I'm really not mad about it, just because his grappling is so excellent. I mean, it's kind of the same thing with like Khabib. Yeah, I would have liked to see more of a stand-up, but don't really care, because his grappling is so good that it does not matter. You can go so far in this sport with that style. And Dakota's tough, too. That's the thing. He's tough. So I don't see any reason why he shouldn't go back to the UFC. I mean, I guess some people might argue, like, oh, he needed to get a finish or whatever. I don't know. I don't think so. Hopefully the right opportunity pops up for him soon. It is about to be turkey season. So if you want Dakota to fight, you better be the UFC. That's all I'm saying. So maybe we will see him. That would be really cool to see him on the St. Louis card May 11th. That would be awesome. We'll see if he will make an exception for the turkey season. The only complication, though, with Dakota is that he's in the lightweight division, which is a very tough division. I really do wonder if you were to put all the lightweight fighters on a list, and I know they have the rankings on SureDog and Tapology and all that, but that doesn't really tell you anything. Because a lot of times those rankings aren't even completely accurate. But I just wonder, where is he at as far as, like, the rankings go overall? Like, if he was in the UFC, where would he be ranked? I don't know. I really don't know. I'm trying to see if I can find some kind of ranking somewhere. They don't really have rankings anywhere. They used to have that, or maybe they still do. Maybe I just can't find it, but they used to have, like, it would show you a ranking. But let's take a look at the UFC real quick. The UFC matchmaking rankings, whatever you want to call it. So let's look at the top 15 at lightweight. So we've got Drew Dober is number 15. Bobby Green's number 14. See, I feel like there are some winnable fights for Dakota, even in the top 15. And then you've got Gamrot, you got Dariush, you got Fiziev, you got Jalen Turner, Dan Hooker, Dos Anjos, St. Denny. But I also feel like this is a time where we're going to see a shift in the top 15 at lightweight too. So I think this is a good time, honestly, for Dakota to try to get back in the picture in the UFC at lightweight. I think this is a perfect time for him. I mean, Grant Dawson's not in the top 15 anymore, but he's top 15 level. I mean, he had the loss to Bobby Green. It is what it is. He got caught. But if you look at his entire resume, it's like, dude, that guy was on a tear for a long time. If you have been following any local MMA, or if you've been following Dakota and you've been following the UFC, who do you think, if Dakota were to go back to the UFC, who do you think he should fight?